Next up, it's that time of year, postseason edition. We have to have a roundtable conversation with a guy that certainly fits the bill. Kevin Shaffer from the Colorado Preps Network. He's been doing the Scoreboard Show, which I often tweet about as an FNL tradition. For 17 years, he's been doing that, so he's a notable guy to be having this conversation. So immediate react, Kevin. Brackets are out. We knew this would come. There's some pains. There's some happiness. Starting with what I call the cold-hearted snubs. And again, we temper with this that, head coaches and media said there would be teams and players that were going to get hurt because there's only 8 making the postseason in each of the brackets. So, one of them that pops out if we start at the big schools, Columbine. And, with them 4-1 and out, the first thing I think of is losing the Ralston Valley game. What an impact that seems to be now that the brackets are out.
Yes, and you can use that example. You can also go the other way. We were talking about Ralston Valley may have hurt themselves by picking up a game with Valor Christian that ended up with a loss. So all these lost games really put some teams in tough positions. Do we play? Do we take a no contest? And if we play, who do we play? Do we work on getting a win? Do we work on getting schedule strength? So there was a lot of factors this year. And we knew 5A and 4A especially were going to feature some teams not in the playoffs because 5A the last couple of years, they've had 2014 brackets. 4A was scheduled to go to a 2014 bracket this year, and you trim that all the way down to 8. So suddenly it's extremely difficult to get in. And Columbine obviously is kind of the feature one. Grandview's a typical team that makes the state quarterfinals, and they lost a late game to Cherokee Trail. But obviously they're a team that's playoff worthy. So in 5A, there's a lot of traditional programs that aren't in the bracket of 8. But like you said, we knew this. It was going to be a rare field. And then also another factor is just the fewer games. Some teams only played 4, 5, and then the most you could play was 6. And what happens there, Marty, is the RPI is not really a true reflection of how the season is going because that system works better with more games. So if you get to 9 or 10 regular season games or 20 in basketball, for say, you have a better representation of teams. And so we saw big fluctuations in where a team moved up or down based on just one game. Typically, you don't get that.
At the 4A level, you had a couple of 5-1 squads that certainly could make an argument that they fit in the cold-hearted snub category. Skyline and Brighton, they're out. What's your reaction to seeing that?
Yeah, I had Skyline in as one of my playoff teams from the get-go in the preseason. We actually made predictions on which team would make it, and I thought they were a top 8 team all season long. And obviously their only loss is overtime at Loveland on a very cold night, 27-26. So that's their only blemish. Really hard to keep them out. And then Brighton had a fantastic year. Their only loss to Broomfield by 9 points in week 2, basically in a playoff elimination from that point on. They ran the table and got a great win up at Windsor late in the year. And so I thought they were in the bracket. And 4A, Marty, mathematically was the toughest bracket to get in because they had the most teams playing. Only 27% of the teams get into the playoffs. Normally you're around 50%, when you have a 16-team bracket. So mathematically 4A was tough. And going into the last weekend, I counted 13 teams I thought that should get consideration for a playoff berth. So, Vista Ridge, Rampart, Rampart, I feel bad for them because 2 weeks ago they beat Fountain Fort Carson. Okay. And that was a great win, put them in playoff position. And then their opponent in week 6, Pueblo West, had to bow out because of COVID. So who does Rampart schedule? Fountain Fort Carson again. Mm-hmm. And man, you just beat them. You ticked them off and you're going to play them again. And they lost, and that may have cost them a playoff berth. So again, I wish we could reward them for doing the right thing, if you will, by scheduling a game, even though it hurt them in the long run.
Let's get into the brackets, starting with Class 5A. You've got the 1 seed, the juggernaut, Cherry Creek. They're going to open up against number 8, Regis. A couple of pedigree programs with lots of history. They first met in the postseason back in 1980. Interesting note, this will be the 5th time in 50 years they actually meet in the playoffs. Cherry Creek is stacked, and that's no secret. I actually had to refresh my memory on the inventory of FBS commits and prospects. I think of Arden Walker, Gus Zelinskis, Miles Purchase, Chase Penry, Al Ashford, Gunnar Helm. There's Julian Hammond, who's actually a Pac-12 basketball commit playing quarterback. Sorry if I missed somebody. But let me move aside from the talent. what seemed noticeable after the ups and downs and drama and shotgun start once we got this thing going, Cherry Creek, who was clearly the defending champions and justified favorite to win it again, they appeared as much or more prepared than any other team in the state once this thing got going.
Yeah, they were dominant from the get-go. I mean, I think they struggled in the first half of game one a little bit to get their football feet underneath them, if you will. But other than that, they really haven't been pushed. And as you know, Marty, they made a huge statement in the final week. I was glad they rescheduled that game. Had to sit out week 5, and then they pushed back that matchup in week 6 from Thursday to Saturday so they could play. But wow, 50-0 Cherry Creek with that big win. And sometimes it's hard to put a value on it because we don't know who Eagle Crest played or had eligible for that game because of quarantine. So sometimes those are a little out of place with the margin of victory. But I think Cherry Creek made a huge statement that said, "Okay, guys, you have to get through us to win the state championship," and they've won 20 in a row overall. And I think they're going to have a little bit of an off game or turn it over 3, 4, 5 times and then have an opponent play an outstanding game for them to get upset, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that was definitely a message by the Bruins.
It was.
Against Eagle Crest to finish up the regular season. So no offense to Clay Nanke, Matthew Bear, a couple of FBS prospects for Regis, but you got to look at Creek. How about Pomona Eagle Crest? Of course, first reference is going to be, hey, first postseason meeting since that 2017 championship game with 105 points. And, to be honest with you, I think we may go there again.
You think so? Do you think?
Yeah, I think it's possible.
Enough offense to get there. I think the lower scoring game would benefit Pomona. I think the more points on the board probably benefits Eagle Crest. And you're still tired from that state championship. You made the call on that game, I know, but that was a wild game. And man, if we get anything close to that, it'll be fantastic. But Pomona defensively, I just don't see them giving up 45 points. And maybe Eagle Crest has to score that many to get the win.
So there you go, Juju Howard in the Pomona Big Black defense. Kevin Shaffer's got your confidence. You of course have to respect Eagle Crest with all the skills players, Shea Ellison, Khalil Howard, JP Luketu running the football. We'll have to see. Again, Eagle Crest gave up 50 points each to Cherry Creek, Cherokee Trail, and then 42 to Grandview. So they're going to have to figure something out in trying to stop an athlete in the quarterback position in Jack Pospisil. How about Valor Cherokee Trail? Since you mentioned CT before, CT's the lone 2-loss team to make it into the playoffs. How do you react to that when I'm talking about Class 5A?
Yeah, they're deserving of they were right on the cusp all year. I mean, their 2 losses, if I remember right, to Creek and Eagle Crest right out of the gate. Yeah. Again, they were kind of playing elimination football all the way through, and I think that win over Grandview in week 5 put them in a strong position to make a playoff, and then they benefited from Columbine's loss to Pomona in the final week there. So, things have gone their way, but now they've got to deal with Gavin Sawchuck and Valor Christian, and Valor's always in the mix. I mean, I don't care who they line up to play, they're always going to be in the mix. And when you have a running back like they do and the line in front of him in cold weather football, they're going to be a tough out. So again, if we get to a point where they would line up with Creek and it's an ugly day, anything can happen because you've got a workhorse there in the backfield that can obviously carry a team a long way.
Yeah, it's still Valor talent, Valor attitude.
Yes.
They are what they are, and they've earned that respect. So Cherokee Trail, I've seen some good stuff. Their offense has a lot of skills players if they can be consistent about it. And then, like you just said, you're talking Sawchuck and a Valor offensive line. So Hunter Wilson, Elijah Graham on the back end. You got to come sharpest as you ever have before. How about the last of the quarterfinals, which is what they are? Legend is the best story in Class 5A. Agree?
Yes and no, to be honest with you. Because
okay.
when we made our playoff projections back in the preseason, I had them in the final 8 because you look at their roster, they returned a ton of talent from last year's club, and last year's club was the first ever Legend team to win a playoff game. They were bounced in round 2, but that experience, I think, proved to them that, hey, we can win on the 5A level and we can compete. And when they beat Regis kind of midway through, I think that kind of sealed their deal to get into the bracket and then beat a pretty good 4A team in Pine Creek, the defending champs, late as well. So I think they're deserving, and I think they were a final 8 team possibly even if we had a 2014 bracket, and they have a coach who knows how to get places. Monty Thielen, Cherokee Trail to a championship game, so he knows what it takes to win. So I'm not surprised by them at all, to be honest with you.
Well, I think when I talk stories, I'm thinking, what Connor Ice has been there, has done, and you think of some of the other guys. They have big fellas like James Betchert and Luke Sandy. Is already legend has advanced the farthest they ever have in program history in the playoffs. And then you look at who they're playing as Fairview. Tom McCartney's been doing this for 2.5 decades. They are what they always are, right? And which is why they're here.
Yeah, and I think the one benefit they have, they've always known for throwing the football and getting points on the board. But I honestly think their defense is their story this year, because typically they've had trouble stopping people and they've had to score 45 to get wins. But I'm not sure that's the case this year. I think their defense can stack up and stop some people and get some stops and some turnovers and actually give their offense maybe good field position. So, I think they might be better defensively than they've been for quite a few years, maybe till when they went back to the finals, 2013, I think the last time they got there. So I think their defense may be a little bit better of a story this year than their offense, which is always a very good operation.
Yeah, I like the reported stats on the quarterback, Liam O'Brien. 310 yards a game, that's pretty pedestrian for Fairview. 18 touchdowns, just one interception. So that's highly efficient. And then you think of Grant Page as one of those athletes. That'll be a fun game to watch. Let's move to Class 4A. Dakota Ridge has been the top seed throughout the course of the pandemic regular season. I think that's deserving with all the talent they have, and now they sit as the 1 seed in the brackets.
Yeah, the one thing I'll throw out to you throughout the entire playoffs, Marty, in 4A, there's not going to be an upset in my mind. I think these 8 teams are close together, and I think you could have stretched that to probably 12 to 13 teams that could have been in this bracket, and any of those 12 could beat the other one on a given day. Dakota Ridge, the one concern is, have they been tested this year? We talked to Coach Woj on our scoreboard show last Friday, and he said, yeah, it's a concern, but most of my core guys were part of the team that made it to the state semifinals and lost that game late. So that made them hungry. They have experience of playoff football from a year ago. So I think their schedule to where they didn't get pushed in the fourth quarter this year is probably not a concern for them, because the guys that'll carry the freight, so to speak, have been there before.
Yeah, and Charlie Offedal in our Next Up series explained that the time is now, and they've got a seasoned group, with guys like Ben Gultig and the rest of that crew. They're ready. So despite the fact that they all concede Jeffco 4A was a little weaker than usual, hey, they've got a good core group, and they must respect that Montrose team making it. I usually don't like to give any points for who you lose to, but we know who they lost to, right?
Right. And
they're in the playoff bracket.
Yeah, one other thing on Dakota Ridge, Coach Woj told me that he feels this is his best team he's ever had at Dakota Ridge, and that's over 2 decades. But Montrose, the little asterisk that I didn't know until late on Saturday night, I was texting with their coach, Brett Mertens, and he told me they were playing with a backup quarterback with those 2 losses to Palmer Ridge and Ponderosa. So, would that have made a difference? Who knows? But they had Palmer Ridge down at halftime and then just got blown over in the third quarter, and Ponderosa was a tight battle, and their coach, Jaron Cohen, told me that's a playoff team. And so it's good for Montrose to get there. Probably some question marks because they are 4-2 compared to some of the other teams, but their schedule stacks up with anybody. And again, referring cold weather, they can run the football. And again, if you get an ugly day, that's an all-day effort on your defense to get them off the field.
Yeah, Mertens and Montrose, they would like that ugly day. How about Broomfield and Loveland? I mean, that pops off the page because you're thinking, oh, that's old school right there. First playoff meeting was back in 1978, and here they go again. They're going to get after each other, which is good entertainment for us, right?
Yes, it is. 2 of the most storied programs, obviously, in Colorado history. And Loveland has Zach Grotowski and their fine sophomore quarterback. Maybe a lot of people haven't heard that name, but Harstad, he's going to be a special one. And Broomfield also has a sophomore quarterback that, Marty, I don't think was scheduled to start this year. They had Kapushian back for the senior, and then when Shazza made the original decision not to play, he went out of state, and his name escapes me, but he stepped up.
It's Cole LaCrew.
Thank you.
On tape, I've seen a few games with them. Cole LaCrue is a very efficient, nice quarterback, and him and his guys like Josh Dunn and Hall Edmonds, they're a fun group, and they're definitely productive, right?
Right, and they've got a big front line in front of that crew to protect the quarterback and run the football, and you've got the explosiveness with Dunn. Another thing to think about is their kicker. I mean, he's got a big leg, and I mean, almost everything he boots is a touchback, which forces the other team to drive 80 yards. And in the overtime win over Windsor, when they got the turnover in the first possession, they didn't mess around. They went right to their kicker on the first play and booted a field goal. And he's got a strong leg. And again, in a tight game late, that's a factor on the high school level. If you can boot one from 45, that's a difference. And so that's an advantage Broomfield may have on some other teams on the 4A level.
Yeah, I always get excited when a high school level program actually has commitment and has the talent in the kicking game because, like you said, that can pay off, especially this time of year. Ponderosa, Fountain Fort Carson, I think of some talented players that have caught my attention over this short pandemic season. I'm thinking of quarterback Jack Hannenberg and all his skills players, Cale Porter and Bodie Jensen for Pondo. And then if you're talking Fountain Fort Carson, it's got to be Q Jones, right? I mean, just the recorded stats for this kid has been outstanding for the Trojans.
Yeah, and if I'm Jaron Cohen, I might hook up with Troy Ward, the head coach of Rampart, because the first time those two teams played, they kind of held Fountain Fort Carson in check a little bit, down to 17 points, which was well below their average, and really prevented the big explosive play. And I think that's the key to playing with Fountain Fort Carson is don't let them run off an 85-yard touchdown dash because that gets them excited. And Hannenberg arguably could be the best quarterback in 4A for Ponderosa. He's had an outstanding year. His numbers midway through were extremely accurate, and he's a good leader, and that's what you want in a playoff drive late in the season.
Yeah, a little frickin' frack going on there, right? Pondo, explosive offense. The Trojans going to go through Q Jones, who averages 233 yards a game. Now, up the road from Fountain Fort Carson, there's going to be a game with a lot of stories to it. Pine Creek and Palmer Ridge, so many layers. I mean, there's all kinds of great talent, but the storylines are amazing. I joked on Twitter that I'd like to be the sideline reporter because I could just go all day and just repeatedly deliver value in terms of storylines.
Yeah, these programs have any success? Are they familiar with the playoff run at all? I mean, Palmer.
I was totaling it up. These two programs, 5 championship appearances combined in the previous 3 years. That's good.
Yeah, and 4 titles. That's even more important. Palmer Ridge. I hate to say they're playing with a chip on their shoulder, but they've won 3 in a row on the 3A level, so they bump up to 4A, and I think they want to prove themselves on that level. And Pine Creek has really been the standard bearer in 4A for the past decade or so. You have to beat them really to win the championship, but I'm not sure the Eagles are the team they've been the last couple years. They got a slow start because they missed their first 2 games, and then the next 2 games were against 5A programs that were struggling. So they have been tested the last 2 weeks in losses. And so, are they the Pine Creek of old? We'll see on Friday or Saturday when they line up. And the one thing I remember, it was in the preseason meeting that they had at the Broncos camp that Chazza puts together. This was not this year, but last year when these 2 teams were scheduled to play. Coach Todd Miller of Pine Creek says, they don't like us, we don't like them. Should be a fun game. And this is going to turn into a great rivalry, I think. Right.
And a great focus, which adds to good postseason football. Maybe there's bad weather. A lot of the focus will be along the line of scrimmage. You've got the Monument Moving Company going against Pine Creek, who always has some talent up there in the trenches.
And the receiving core for Palmer Ridge, I would stack those guys up with anybody in the state, to be honest with you. Dudley, outside, Costanzo, I think, is their tight end. And so, I mean, they've got weapons all over the place, and it's hard to double up. So the McAllister's going to find some open receivers, and Pine Creek's going to have to tackle in the secondary.
Yeah, Pine Creek, you just named 2 names. Pine Creek's got to find 2 already committed Mountain West football players, and McAllister and Dudley, and then you have the rest. So if we go to 3A, pops off the page for me, and this fits right in your area, Kevin, Roosevelt and Fort Morgan. I mean, I'm thinking that's just a good postseason atmosphere. Of course, Roosevelt got their win against Meade in overtime about a month ago, and then they've destroyed everybody since then. Surprisingly, when I have this image and perception of success, which they've earned, but the Riders, they won a championship in 2015, but just one playoff win since then. So now that they're a 1 seed, they've got some opportunities to do some great things again, right?
They do, and this is an ironic matchup because they were supposed to play in week 5, and that was going to be a big, big game on the 3A playoff level. In fact, Fort Morgan at the time when they had to drop out of that game because of COVID issues, they were concerned it would cost them, kind of like Columbine and Ralston Valley in 5A. They thought it might cost them a chance at the playoffs, and things fell into place here in the final week to get them in. And it's ironic that they schedule them after missing a game 2 weeks ago. So this should be a great matchup. You've got a couple of good dual quarterbacks. Brig Hartson for Roosevelt can run and throw it. He's got some good receivers, and especially a very good-looking sophomore. I think Peterson is his name. And Fort Morgan, their dual quarterback is Briggs Wheatley. He can run and throw, just a junior as well. So I think who wins that battle, maybe at the quarterback spot, probably comes out ahead. But on seed, you got to give Roosevelt the advantage since they're the 1 seed and playing at home.
Now, how about Durango and Lutheran? Jordan Wolverton, the quarterback, who's certainly the eye test. He's an uncommon athlete at the 3A level, leading the Durango. The Demons looking real sharp. And then Lutheran always impresses me as a 3A program. They're just a good program.
And they've scored some big wins this year. They jumped out with the win, I believe, on Green Mountain, and then beat Palisade kind of soundly out on the western slope. And you kind of went, wow. And then Holy Family turned around and gave them a loss. So a very good year, and they're explosive on the offensive end. They run the no huddle, and it's a quick no huddle. They try to get in as many plays as they can. And Durango, though, Marty, I'm not into making predictions on who's going to win it all, but they've been my pick in 3A since day one this year, because you look around 3A, almost every program was replacing a ton of talent, including quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. If memory serves me right, has 17 of 22 starters back from a playoff team a year ago, including Jordan Wolverton. Another athlete has been Finney-Smith. They've also got Mestis out on the outside, but they've got a lot of guys you've never heard of that are very talented, and they've got a great atmosphere too down there. They haven't let fans into the games recently, but the fans go and park around the stadium and honk their horns extremely loudly when good things happen. So right. It'll be a fun atmosphere, but Durango's been my pick since day one to win it all in 3A, and to be honest with you, they still are.
That's a great visual, too, for playoff time, is Renegade Demons in La Plata County. They're going to watch their football team because it's a very good year.
And they showed some depth last week because they beat a pretty good Canyon City team. Yeah, we're at home, and they'd probably already clinched a playoff spot. But Wolverton's the starting quarterback. Finney-Smith is a wide receiver, but he's their backup quarterback. Neither were able to play because of COVID, so they were with a third-string quarterback that hadn't taken a snap since middle school. They still beat a very good football team.
The other two matchups in Class 3A postseason, those have headlines to them. We'll start with Pueblo South, the easy one. Meade, the 5 seed, had to bail out because of COVID issues. They will concede and forfeit. So how about head coach Ryan Goddard? That's now officially their 4th semifinal appearance in 8 seasons for head coach Ryan Goddard. The Colts on Hollywood Drive are back in the semis, and it's very 2020 how they got there.
It is, I don't think there's ever been a semifinal team in any class in Colorado that gotten there with 4 wins, and they're 4-0, and they had to scramble just to make the playoffs, not because of their record, just because of the number of games. They were supposed to play Pueblo Central there in the final week, and Central again had to bow out. And I mean, I don't know if it was Ryan calling or his AD calling, but they were dialing up any program in the state because they needed a game just to get in. And they obviously got a win late over a very good Vista Ridge team. And so they have plenty of momentum going into the bracket. But they're going to be fresh, Marty. Mm-hmm. Great running back in George Longoria, and he's only had to run the football in 4 games this year. So they only need 2 more wins, and they're fresh.
And that's one of those things during this odd year is, where does that come into play? And we'll see. Are they fresh, or, are they missing and out of sync because of the lack of play? We're going to find out, right? Because they're, again, already making the semis. Now, I saved the one, with Holy Family and Evergreen for last here because it has good storylines. Starting with Holy Family, respect to them as a 2 seed, 6-0 on the season. I was surprised, with all the success we've seen from head coach Mike Gabriel and there's always great talent and record-setting offensive units. Only one playoff win in the past decade. They're here, and they're good.
They are, and a lot of their playoff struggles in the past are due to injuries or a not very good defense, and neither one has happened this year. They have a very good defense. With Coach Gabriel kind of mid-season, in fact, after they beat Lutheran, and he says, we got guys on the defense that can run and they like to hit people, and that's a good combination for the defensive side. And they always have a good quarterback, and they do again this year, but in the past, that quarterback has usually gone down to injury 6, 7, 8 games into the year, and that isn't the case this year. So I think this is a team that has a legitimate shot of winning the championship because they're solid on both sides of the football, and they may have the advantage this week against Evergreen just due to some, off the field concerns for the Cougars.
Yeah, and you walk us into the conversation that is absolutely relevant and timely. Evergreen comes in as a 2-loss team into the Class 3A bracket. We know they've got some talent. Noah Martins is an outstanding running back. Reported stats at about 174 yards a game. But the catalyst for everything with the Evergreen Cougars, and not only on the field but off the field, is the quarterback Griffin Loretano. He is not scheduled to play this football game. We had the interview with him. He had to miss the first game and then concede that he would not play in the playoffs. And despite all the things we're dealing with in a pandemic, as of right now, he is not going to be able to participate for the Cougars of Evergreen.
Right. As of right now, I know they're still trying to get that changed. And to be honest with you, Marty, I hope they do, because 2020 in my mind has been all about giving kids a chance to play. That's why we're playing football in the fall, because some kids may have to transfer to college at midseason and would miss their senior year. And so we're doing a lot of things to give the kids an opportunity to play football. And I think this falls under the same category. I understand there's transfer rules, and I get all of that. And you want to adhere to the rules. But in my mind, we've broken a lot of those rules this year just for a chance to play football. And I think in this year, as wild as it's been, we should err on the side of the kid giving him a chance to play. Because you look back at the situation, Chazza made the decision along with the state health department and the governor. They made the decision, we're not going to play football in the fall. And Griffin Loretano was one of a few kids that transferred out of state because they wanted to play in the fall. And then when that decision was reversed, I think all of the kids, not just Griffin, but all of the kids should have been given the opportunity to come back and play for their home school, if you will, because if Chazza and the state has the option to reverse that decision, so should the kids who made a decision based on that initial decision. If you follow me, I think they should be given a chance to come back and play. And so I hope, I don't want to get into the legal aspect of it. I hope that isn't the case, but I hope we make the quote unquote right decision here and give the kid the opportunity to play. And I would also say, and I haven't asked him, but I would say any coach in Colorado that's still playing in the playoffs, if it's in 3A or any division, even if they have to play against Evergreen, would probably vote in favor of letting the kid play.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Is that you want the best of what can be here in the postseason. So I would guess, and I don't know, that Mike Gabriel and his staff would say, yeah, let him play. And then I want to consider a couple of angles with the decision-making logic to this story. This looks like it's about punishment. And if it's blunt and final, like it is, well, then we as community members get to judge it as that. It's punishment. It's not about solutions, resolutions, or positive outcomes. And this punishment is not applied to just one single person, which would be Griffin Loretano, but it applies to every player on that team, staff members, all the supporters, and that punishment is forever. It's not just one date in November 2020. Now, if you're a strict constructionist, rules are rules. Kid knew, kid agreed, can't have your pudding if you don't eat your meat. Then, you know what? I think you have to consider real-life historical samples of what occurred when Loretano served his one-game suspension to start this regular season. Evergreen played Palisade. Evergreen Cougars scored one touchdown. Palisade is a 4-2 team with the head-to-head edge in terms of, playoff seedings. Palisade has a full roster, no asterisks. Everybody is aware of that. It's a respected program. You don't have to worry about PR risks. Maybe you give Palisade that spot.
Right. And that's a hard one because those are based on, hard numbers with pollings and all that. And so that's hard to pull them out if they've earned their right. But I just go back, and it's hard to know, but I would guess Griffin is not transferring to Georgia if Chazza and the football season moves on as scheduled. I don't think he even has that across his mind because he's played with these kids, his teammates, all the way up from middle school to high school or JV and now to the varsity level. And he just wants to finish his career there in Evergreen. And again, I just hope, I get that he agreed to the situation where he could play in the regular season, knowing he may not be able to play in the postseason. But I still think in this year, we need to err on the side of the player and give them the opportunity to play.
Those fortunate to get to play, #blessed, they go on the fast track. 3 games, 3 weeks, and then we have one standing in each classification, just like that.
Exactly. And the one thing we haven't touched upon, Marty, that I think is a good thing, this is the first year in a long time that we're able to crown all the state champions, basically, not on the same day, but the same weekend. Usually we have a staggered finish.
Yeah.
Or 6 and 8 man finish here, and then 1A, 2A come in, and then we culminate with 3A, 4A, 5A on the same day. This year we have a grand weekend to wrap up what has been a wild and crazy, if you will, football season. So I think that's a good thing. We probably won't see it again down the road because we'll go back to a staggered season, a staggered finich. But I think that's a good way to culminate what's been just a crazy year.
Yeah, if you're going to use the words wild and crazy, I think Pueblo's a good spot when you're talking football, right? Because Steel City likes themselves some football.
Exactly. And it should be, with limited fans, most likely it's going to be the atmosphere that we could have. But again, I just like the aspect that we're going to hand out 7 trophies over a 3-day period, all at the same location. I know a lot of people don't like it maybe, and they don't maybe like having to travel all the way down to Pueblo, but I'm just happy we get to finish and that we get to crown all the champions kind of together.
That's Kevin Shaffer, Colorado Preps Network, as we launch into football postseason 2020.
You're proud to call Colorado home. So are we. Since 1973, we've been giving back to the communities where we live, work, and play across our great state. And we're here to stay. If you're looking for an independent, locally managed community bank where the employees are also the owners, we would like to be your bank. We're Alpine Bank.